Welcome to the debate. Today, we're tackling a really fascinating evolution in one of the most ancient forms of self-examination, journaling. For generations, a journal just meant pen and paper. But, rapidly advancing technology is pushing personal reflection into digital audio and voice recording.
And it's a hugely important shift. It really forces us to reevaluate the foundational purpose of the practice itself. I mean, if journaling is just about capturing thought, then yes, speed and consistency are everything. But if it's about reflection, then structure and forced contemplation, well, they take precedence.
That is the core tension right there. Does the sheer speed and accessibility offered by modern voice journaling inherently make it the superior method for the modern user who is, let's face it, always time-constrained? Or does that forced slowness and deliberate structure of traditional writing retain a critical advantage for achieving, genuine depth and long-term analytical use?
Exactly.
I'll be arguing that voice journaling, or VJ, is the superior tool. It solves the massive hurdle of friction, making a consistent practice viable for the maximum number of people, and it aligns with how many of us are just neurologically wired to process information.
And I am going to argue that while speed is certainly appealing, journaling's essential value lies in the structure and constraint of writing. So traditional written journaling is really the only method that reliably ensures the careful contemplative examination of life that frankly makes the practice worthwhile in the first place.
That's an interesting frame, that writing is superior because it's constrained. I appreciate that distinction, but I think that overlooks a critical factor. The single biggest barrier to maintaining any reflective practice is simply time and friction. And voice journaling just addresses this immediately and decisively.
I hear that, but true value isn't derived from efficiency. It's derived from the quality of the reflection and the analysis. Traditional writing forces a necessary cognitive constraint. When you are forced to slow your output, you naturally create space for contemplative thought, for filtering the raw data before it even hits the page.
I understand the argument for the bottleneck, I do. But let's just talk numbers for a second. Data shows we speak at, 150 plus words per minute, whereas handwriting typically hovers somewhere between 20 and 40 words per minute.
Right.
So that means what takes a user 10 minutes of dedicated time to write out a decent entry, it takes only 3 minutes to capture by voice. This isn't just a small convenience, it's the difference between a consistent daily practice and a failed attempt. VJ maximizes consistent engagement by minimizing friction. And on top of that, we just can't ignore the superior accessibility. I mean, VJ works while you're multitasking, walking, driving, cooking, and it completely removes barriers for people with dysgraphia, dyslexia, or physical limitations. For people with ADHD, who often require extremely low friction input, VJ is frequently the only format that actually works.
Okay. I fully acknowledge the immense advantage voice offers in terms of speed and physical accessibility. They're irrefutable facts. But the danger is that you're framing journaling primarily as a productivity tool, measuring success by the volume of capture rather than the quality of insight. My core argument is that writing captures depth more naturally precisely because it forces that slowing down. If the goal is, as the source material puts it, careful life examination, then that slowness is a necessary feature.
I'd frame it a bit differently. The goal is consistent examination that then leads to depth. Without consistency, depth is just impossible. But let's move into the heart of the disagreement here. Speed versus what you called the bottleneck feature.
Right. You laud the speed of voice journaling, but think of someone dealing with racing, anxious thoughts. The enforced slowness of writing acts as a powerful brake. It forces the mind to organize and prioritize. When you allow processing at full speed, as VJ does, you risk merely ventilating, just releasing disorganized emotional energy rather than truly processing it, which is the structuring analytical work.
I'm just not convinced that at the bottleneck is a beneficial feature for the majority of users. You're applying a universal standard to what is a highly individualized cognitive process. We know that, 30 to 40% of people are verbal processors. They genuinely need to talk to know what they think. Writing isn't slowing them down to achieve deeper analysis. It's actively blocking their natural thought process because of the cognitive misalignment and the high friction. And when you're dealing with strong emotions like distress or excitement, the last thing the brain wants is to be artificially slowed down. VJ lets you process at what some studies call emotional speed. This just ensures the raw thought is captured before it evaporates.
That is an interesting distinction between ventilation and processing. If the objective is rapid emotional release, then I will concede voice wins. But if the objective is the contemplative understanding and structuring of those emotions, the slowing effect of writing is paramount. You are essentially bypassing the executive function, the part of the brain responsible for organization, all for the sake of speed. The writing bottleneck serves to move the user from initial venting towards structured analytical thought, which makes the entry inherently more valuable for later review.
But what evidence do we have that the initial speed of capture actually prevents later analysis? Or does it merely ensure that the raw emotional data is secured before the moment passes? In fact, voice journaling offers an analytical layer writing can't. You hear your own emotional tone played back. That hearing activates regulatory brain regions and provides immediate psychological distance. It's a form of metacognition, hearing the content and the context simultaneously. This actually gives voice a slight edge in raw emotional processing compared to the silent translation required for written text.
Okay, let's move to the intersection of accessibility and ritual then. I freely grant VJ's physical accessibility advantages, but traditional journaling caters specifically to those who think visually or spatially. Paper allows for diagrams, arrows, mind maps, sketches that voice just cannot capture directly. And furthermore, the physical ritual, the weight of the book, the feel of the pen, that holds deep psychological value. Think of it like a habit trigger. That ritual cues the brain into a reflective state that digital interfaces, well, they struggle to replicate.
I see that point.
And let's not overlook the most practical barrier to VJ, privacy. You can jot down deep, highly personal thoughts in a crowded coffee shop, a busy office, or a train car. You absolutely cannot voice journal in those same environments without breaching privacy and disturbing others. This severely limits the on-the-go utility you praise. Writing remains location agnostic. Voice does not.
That is a compelling counterpoint on location privacy, which is absolutely a practical limitation of VJ. I grant you that. However, we have to weigh the potential loss of that ritual against the practical benefit of simply capturing thoughts and emotions that would otherwise be lost entirely.
I go back to my fundamental metric. The best method is unequivocally the one you actually stick with. For those who abandon writing due to friction or cognitive misalignment, VJ provides a format their brain needs. Furthermore, the supposed superiority of memory encoding in writing is, I think, often overstated. Studies confirm the production effect for speech is comparable to memory encoding for writing.
Wait, can you just clarify what you mean by the production effect?
Certainly. That's the established concept that the act of actively producing the content, whether by speaking it out loud or physically writing it down, aids memory encoding and retrieval pretty much equally. So, in terms of learning or retaining the information you just processed, speaking the entry is just as effective as writing it. Therefore, prioritizing the ritual of the pen over the act of capture when friction is high is prioritizing an unnecessary barrier over consistent self-engagement.
We might diverge on the goal here. Even if memory encoding is equal, long-term utility requires easy reviewability, and this is where I find VJ fundamentally lacking for any serious sustained self-analysis.
And why do you see that utility gap as so decisive?
Because easy reviewability is essential for the journal to function as a history of thought, allowing the user to track patterns and triggers. Written journals let users visually skim, highlight, and see the architecture of their past thoughts quickly. If I want to track my recurring anxieties or my professional successes over a year, skimming 300 written entries is a few minutes' work. Listening to 300 raw voice recordings is days of listening. It is utterly impractical for historical utility without robust transcription.
That review bottleneck is undeniable. I agree. When you're dealing with raw audio, but this is a point where modern technology fundamentally changes the equation.
How so?
Well, the gap isn't just closing rapidly. For anyone using a competent VJ app, it is already closed. Modern transcription technology is highly accurate. You can search voice recordings as efficiently as text. And perhaps more critically, VJ provides rich data that simple text does not. Metadata like emotional tone, speaking speed, and duration.
Okay, but you're relying on an AI.
I am relying on data. This data allows for automated analysis. You don't have to manually skim pages for patterns. An AI can summarize your mood trends over the last quarter, identify recurring keywords, or flag entries where your voice speed increased due to stress. This kind of high-level pattern recognition is extremely difficult, bordering on impossible, to derive from static, handwritten text unless you painstakingly index everything yourself. The efficiency of analysis actually flips, favoring voice input.
I take issue with the idea that AI summarization is a substitute for the reflective process of manual review. When you manually flip through your written entries, you are re-engaging with your past self deliberately. The friction of the raw voice recording forces you to rely on a technological intermediary, the AI summary, which risks filtering or streamlining the nuances of the original thought. For careful life examination, you need to read the messy, original prose to truly reconnect with your past mental state, and written text provides that immediate access.
But if the initial thought is never captured because the high friction of writing prevented it, then there is nothing to analyze, messy or otherwise. The evidence points to the fact that consistency is the primary challenge in journaling. VJ addresses that head-on. The ability to capture a thought instantly when you're stuck in traffic, when you wake up in the middle of the night, or when you're walking the dog, just makes the practice sustainable.
I understand the practicality.
In those high-friction moments, VJ ensures the raw data is captured. If the user then chooses to sit down later and analyze that automatically transcribed text, they can. They get the consistency of VJ and the reviewability of writing. If the choice is between high-friction, high-depth capture that is rarely done and low-friction, high-speed capture that is done daily, VJ provides the better outcome for personal development simply through consistency. It solves the biggest practical complaint about journaling, that it takes too much time and effort.
I do understand the practicality argument entirely. The data confirms that voice journaling is the champion of speed and accessibility, making it the format that aligns with how many people naturally process their thoughts. For sheer, practical, consistent capture, getting the thought out of your head and recorded, it is arguably the superior tool for the modern, time-constrained individual.
Thank you. I think acknowledging the necessity of consistency as the foundational metric is key. Without it, the debate about depth is kind of moot.
However, I maintain my core conviction. The most profound benefits of journaling, deliberate contemplation, structured analysis, and truly deep introspection are best served by the intellectual constraints inherent in traditional writing. That bottleneck is not an accident. It is a necessary design choice for reflective depth.
So ultimately, it sounds like the user's choice depends entirely on their primary goal. Are you looking for quick emotional release and maximum consistent capture, which, favors voice?
Or are you focused on contemplative analysis and building a visual history of thought, which absolutely favors writing?
Precisely, and I think we've uncovered the powerful potential of a hybrid approach, using voice for that quick, consistent capture when thoughts are flowing, securing the raw data, and then perhaps using writing for deliberate reflection, slowing down to analyze those transcribed entries later.
Indeed. The key realization here is that the format of journaling should match the moment's need and the user's cognitive style. For ensuring the habit sticks and that the thoughts are captured in those scarce moments, voice journaling provides a practical and neurological fit that the traditional method simply cannot match. Both methods offer distinct, powerful benefits, and the path toward maximizing personal growth, it seems, must involve exploring which one or which combination truly aligns best with the individual's demands. A thoughtful exchange, as always. The conversation will certainly continue as the technology advances.